Welcome to the debate, and actually welcome to the very first episode of the Echoed Eras podcast.
Yes, we are so incredibly excited to be kicking this off with all of you.
We really are, and we are diving straight into the deep end today. I want you to imagine finding a ghost ship.
Oh, I love a good ghost ship analogy.
Right? But it's not drifting at sea. It is parked on a lonely dirt road in the dense mountainous wilderness of Oklahoma.
Just completely isolated.
Exactly. Inside this abandoned pickup truck, there is a starving dog, there are cell phones, GPS devices, and crucially, a bank bag stuffed with $32,000 in cash.
But the owners of that truck and, all that cash, they have simply vanished into thin air.
Vanished. It is the absolute definition of a forensic black hole. Every single physical clue seems to contradict the behavioral clue you just looked at.
Yeah, it really does. You step into this case and it's just a maze.
We are, of course, examining the chilling 2009 disappearance and deaths of the Jamison family. So that's Bobby, who was 44, his wife Sherilynn, who was 40, and their 6-year-old daughter Madyson.
Such a tragic case.
It is. In October 2009, they traveled about 30 miles from their home near Eufaula out to a really remote area of Red Oak. And the foundational facts here are deeply unsettling. They were ostensibly looking to purchase a 40-acre plot of land so they could live inside a metal shipping container.
Right. And then 8 days after they disappeared, their truck was found abandoned.
With the dog still inside.
Yeah, poor Maisie. And it wasn't until 4 years later, in November 2013, that their heavily decomposed skeletal remains were found. They were side by side, face down in the dirt, less than 3 miles away from where they had parked.
Which brings us to the central academic question we are exploring today. Does the evidence point to a profound internal psychological breakdown that led to a fatal misadventure in the wilderness? Or, does it point to an external, orchestrated foul play scenario driven by illicit activities?
The two big theories.
Exactly. And I represent the perspective that this tragedy was the result of a severe compounding mental health crisis. Specifically, I think this was a shared delusion that ultimately destroyed them.
And I take the completely opposing view here. I argue the evidence strongly indicates the Jamisons were intercepted by a criminal element.
You mean like a drug deal gone wrong?
Yes, an illicit transaction heavily tied to the local drug trade that ended in their execution.
Well, to understand why this psychological perspective holds so much weight, you can't just look at the woods. You have to look at their living room in the weeks prior.
Okay, lay it out for me.
This was a family visibly deteriorating, right? Look at the behavioral markers. They were actively trying to isolate themselves. I mean, moving to a remote 40-acre plot to live in a shipping container is not a normal real estate upgrade.
Which is highly unusual for a land purchase, I'll grant you that.
Highly unusual. They even specifically demanded their real estate agent not attend the property viewing.
Yeah, they wanted to go completely alone.
Exactly. And then we have direct testimony from their pastor. Bobby Jamison told him he was seeing spirits inside their home and that he was aggressively reading the Satanic Bible to combat these phantom threats.
It sounds terrifying, honestly.
But the absolute centerpiece of their state of mind is the home security footage from the day they left. It captures the couple in this bizarre, silent, trance-like state, methodically packing their truck. I argue this proves they were operating under a shared psychotic break before they ever turned the key in the ignition.
See, I look at that exact same physical and situational evidence, and I see a picture not of ghosts, but of very real, tangible predators.
Real predators?
Yes. It is completely abnormal for any family to carry $32,000 in cash under the seat of their truck. But I really want to focus on what was taken, not just what was left behind. On that very same security footage, Sherilynn is clearly recorded packing a brown briefcase and a handgun.
Both of which vanished from the scene.
Exactly. They vanished entirely. They weren't in the truck and they weren't found with the remains. You have to contextualize this wealth and these weapons within their environment.
You're talking about Bobby's father.
Right. In 2008, Bobby Jamison filed a lawsuit against his own father, Bob Dean. He alleged death threats, vehicular assault, and deep involvement in the local methamphetamine trade.
I hear that, but that was essentially a family dispute, not a cartel indictment.
But in rural, entrenched, illicit networks, a family dispute that makes it to a public courtroom is a massive liability. If you are exposing a meth syndicate in a lawsuit, you are breaking a code of silence.
So you think they were targeted?
That establishes an undeniable proximity to dangerous people. The cash, the missing gun, the missing briefcase. This wasn't a family fleeing spirits. This was a transaction or shakedown orchestrated by a criminal element, and it went wrong.
Let's dive into the mechanisms of that then, because I think your theory fundamentally misreads human behavior under extreme stress. Let's start with that home security footage.
Okay, the CCTV video.
Yeah. When you watch that video, you are watching two people who are completely untethered from reality. They are walking back and forth to the truck, making dozens of trips, carrying items, stopping, staring blankly, and rarely acknowledging each other. In psychiatric terms, we are seeing a flattening of affect.
Okay, can you unpack that term for the listener? What does flattening of affect actually look like in practice?
Absolutely. Essentially, a flattening of affect means the brain's circuit breaker is tripped.
Like an overload?
Exactly. When internal stimuli, like intense paranoid ideations or terrifying visual hallucinations of spirits, become too overwhelmingly loud, the person's emotional response system just shuts down. They literally stop reacting to the outside world.
So they just look numb.
Yes, they look like silent automatons because all of their cognitive energy is fighting a war inside their own heads.
I understand the clinical definition, I really do. But trance-like is a highly subjective interpretation of a low-resolution security feed. I don't see a tripped circuit breaker at all. I see the paralyzing grip of raw, unadulterated fear.
You think they are just scared?
Think about the mechanics of adrenaline. If you are packing 32 grand in cash, a loaded handgun, and a mysterious briefcase to go out into the remote wilderness to meet individuals associated with a violent drug trade, you aren't chatting about the weather.
Well, no, of course not.
You are terrified. You are laser-focused. Silent, methodical packing is exactly what you would expect from people who know they are walking into a potentially fatal, high-stakes situation. They knew what was waiting for them.
Now, if you were listening to this right now, you were probably screaming at your dashboard. Why on earth would anyone bring a 6-year-old child and a family dog to a high-stakes drug deal?
It's a huge question.
And that is exactly the fatal flaw in the foul play theory. The inclusion of Madyson and their dog, Maisie, aligns perfectly with a family fleeing an imagined, supernatural threat inside their own house.
How so?
If the house is haunted by demons, you take your child and your dog with you to protect them. You do not bring a kindergartner to a meth syndicate shakedown in the mountains.
See, desperation makes people do wildly irrational things. What if they couldn't secure childcare? Or, more chillingly, what if they felt leaving Madyson behind left her vulnerable to the very network they were dealing with?
That's a dark thought.
If you are afraid of a cartel-style retaliation at your home, you keep your family in your line of sight. You don't leave them where the hitman can find them.
I see why you think that, but I need to challenge your foul play theory directly with an analogy here.
Bring it on.
Claiming this was a drug deal or a targeted robbery by a meth syndicate when $32,000 in cash is left sitting under the seat of the truck is like claiming an art heist occurred when the Picasso is still hanging on the wall.
Okay, wow. That is a fair challenge.
It contradicts the fundamental premise of a financial crime. Criminals do not leave 32 grand behind. If this was an illicit transaction gone wrong, that bank bag would be the very first thing to disappear.
Right.
The fact that the money was abandoned strongly suggests the threat was internal. Money means absolutely nothing to someone in the throes of a psychotic break. And the fact that both Bobby and Sherilynn were acting this way points to a well-documented phenomenon, folie à dos, or a shared psychotic disorder.
Explain how that works in this specific context. How do two adults hallucinate the exact same thing?
Well, in a shared psychosis, there's almost always a dominant partner who originates the delusion. So in this case, perhaps Bobby seeing spirits. And then there's a submissive partner.
Okay.
When a couple isolates themselves from society like the Jamisons were doing, the submissive partner adopts the delusion because resisting it threatens their relationship more than accepting it. The delusion becomes their shared reality. They didn't care about the money anymore because you can't bribe a ghost.
I have to admit, leaving $32,000 in cash is a massive stumbling block for a robbery theory. It is deeply counterintuitive.
It's the Picasso on the wall.
It is. However, you are focusing entirely on the money that was left behind, and you are completely ignoring what is conspicuously missing.
You mean the briefcase?
The briefcase, the truck keys, and Sherilynn's handgun. Why assume the cash under the seat was the primary target at all? In the illicit drug trade, assets are often compartmentalized.
Go on.
Actual objective of the perpetrators. Perhaps it held an even larger sum of cash, or illicit ledgers, or a massive quantity of contraband. The $32,000 could have simply been decoy flash money, meant to be shown while the real value was in the briefcase.
That requires an incredible amount of assumptions, though.
Let's look at the environment then. They are out on an exposed dirt road. If another vehicle approaches, or if the perpetrators ambush the family quickly at gunpoint, they don't have time to meticulously tear apart the interior of the truck.
So they just grab the briefcase.
Exactly. They grab the primary target and they march the family away before anyone else comes down the road.
But your theory of a meticulously planned drug hit completely falls apart when you look at where they ended up. And this transitions us perfectly to the final 3 miles, which is honestly the most tragic part of this mystery. We have to explain how they got from that truck to the spot where their remains were found.
Right, deep into the Samboys Mountains.
Exactly. Building on the psychological theory, a paranoid flight completely explains their final resting place. Imagine the mechanism of this panic. They drive out to this remote area. The isolation acts as an echo chamber.
Okay, so the panic is escalating.
The shared delusion peaks. Bobby is hallucinating the spirits he warned his pastor about. They become terrified of something unseen inside or near the truck, so they abandon their vehicle to flee into the dense brush.
But wait, they lock the truck.
They are hallucinating outside. They take the keys, maybe Sherilynn grabs her gun to fend off the imaginary demons, and they run.
Into the woods.
Right. The terrain there is brutal. It's thick, thorny, confusing brush, and the temperatures drop dramatically at night. They get lost, they succumb to the elements, and they die of exposure.
That is a very compelling narrative. But let's look at the logistical reality of exposure in that specific context. I reject the exposure theory entirely.
Why?
Think about the behavior you just described. You are suggesting that a family in the middle of a blind, screaming panic fleeing for their lives from hallucinations had the presence of mind to roll up the windows, lock the doors, extract the keys, and carefully secure the dog inside?
Well, yes, people in delusion still have internal logic. Protecting the dog makes sense to them.
It completely contradicts the erratic, chaotic nature of a psychotic break, in my opinion. Furthermore, they were found less than 3 miles away. Even a lost, disoriented adult can cover 3 miles in a relatively short amount of time.
But not while navigating dense, thorny brush with a 6-year-old child in tow. That slows you down tremendously.
Even so, the physical arrangement of the scene screams third-party involvement to me. Let me explain the why behind what happened in those woods. In rural homicides, moving victims into the wilderness isn't just about hiding bodies. It is a tactic called forced disorientation.
Forced disorientation? What does that entail?
It means the perpetrators don't just want concealment. They want to break the victim's will to run or fight. By marching a family at gunpoint into dense, hostile terrain, the environment itself becomes a secondary weapon. You exhaust them. The truck keys were removed by the killers to disable any chance of escape.
But why leave the dog in the car then, if they're so ruthless?
Not to protect it from spirits, but to silence the scene. A barking dog following a group through the woods creates noise and chaos. You lock the dog in the truck to avoid drawing attention.
Okay, I see that.
Then you force the family deep into the woods 3 miles deep to a location where you can execute them reasonably certain they won't be found for years. And the perpetrators were exactly right. It took 4 years and 2 random hunters to finally stumble upon them.
But if this was an execution, we circle right back to the glaring lack of forensic evidence for it. The skeletal remains were found side by side, face down on the dirt. There was no obvious skeletal trauma reported that would definitively indicate a violent execution-style murder of all three individuals.
Well, you have to consider the condition of the remains.
Wait, let me finish this thought. If this was a professional hitman associated with the meth trade, why walk them 3 miles through incredibly difficult terrain? A professional hit would be executed quickly near the vehicle, or the bodies would be transported in a trunk and buried in a pre-dug grave.
Not necessarily.
They wouldn't simply be left on the surface of the forest floor. That side-by-side resting place is just as indicative of a family huddling together against the freezing cold, eventually succumbing to hypothermia.
Huddling theory, but let me explain the forensic reality of what we are dealing with. Searching for a cause of death after bodies have been exposed to the wilderness for 4 years is like trying to read a book after it's been put through a washing machine.
Oh, wow. That's a grim image.
It is, but it's accurate. The soft tissue, the organs, the skin, that is the ink. The bones are just blank pages. A small caliber bullet to the heart, fatal strangulation, or even lethal poisoning would leave absolutely zero trace on heavily degraded bones 4 years later.
I mean, that's true.
So the fact that there was no blunt force trauma to the skull doesn't rule out execution at all. Nature wiped the forensic slate clean.
But the lack of evidence for a crime isn't proof of a crime either.
True, but the staging of the event points to human predators. The disabled vehicle, the silenced dog, the missing weapon, the vanished briefcase. Walking victims into the woods is deeply documented in these kinds of crimes. Forcing them to lie face down, side by side on the ground is entirely consistent with victims being ordered to submit before being shot.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because it requires us to completely dismiss a mountain of behavioral precursors. For your theory to work, we have to ignore the isolation in the shipping container.
I don't think we ignore it,
We have to ignore the pastor's explicit testimony about demonic warfare in their living room. We have to ignore the bizarre CCTV footage of their flattened affect. If this was just a drug deal gone wrong, it requires an astronomical coincidence that a cartel hit happened at the exact moment the family was publicly deteriorating from an observable mental health crisis.
See, I don't think it's a coincidence at all. I argue that their deteriorating mental state made them highly vulnerable targets.
Vulnerable how?
Because profound, justified fear can look exactly like clinical paranoia to an outside observer. If Bobby Jamison knew he was in the crosshairs of a violent narcotics syndicate, knowing he broke the code of silence with that lawsuit, he would be terrified.
Sure, fear is powerful.
He might check his security cameras constantly. He might arm his wife with a handgun. He might pack a briefcase with everything he had to try and buy his way out of a threat. Just because you are acting paranoid doesn't mean someone isn't actually hunting you.
That brings us to a really sobering point of convergence in our discussion today. As we summarize our positions, I maintain that the bizarre behavioral precursors, the trance-like packing, the spiritual fixations, the extreme isolation, coupled with the completely abandoned $32,000, strongly point to an internal psychological collapse.
The delusion.
Yeah. The compounding nature of a folie à dos is the only through line that connects their behavior at home to their tragic demise in the woods, where they ultimately succumbed to the elements.
And I stand by the physical anomalies. The missing weapon, the missing keys, the vanished briefcase, and the family's undeniable proximity to the violent methamphetamine trade point to an orchestrated external crime. The Jamisons were marched into those woods by a very human threat and permanently silenced.
Yet, we both must explicitly acknowledge the most tragic limitation of this case. Because those remains lay undiscovered in the Sandboys Mountains for 4 years, subjected to that forensic washing machine of weather and wildlife you mentioned, science is fundamentally handcuffed here.
It is. Without soft tissue, toxicology, or clear skeletal trauma, determining the exact cause of death is just impossible. The physical evidence is, and forever will be, inherently incomplete.
Analyzing this case requires balancing two distinct lenses. We have the psychological evaluation of human behavior, trying to decode the minds of people operating under immense reality-fracturing pressure.
And we have the forensic evaluation of physical anomalies, trying to piece together a jigsaw puzzle where half the pieces were washed away by 4 years of rain.
It is a profound mystery that suggests there is still much more to explore in the material for anyone trying to understand the depths of human tragedy. You know, we started by picturing that truck parked on a dirt road like a ghost ship, but maybe the real locked room mystery isn't the truck at all.
What do you mean?
Maybe the ultimate locked room is the human mind. When the doors of perception lock from the inside, we are left unable to tell the phantoms we create from the very real predators waiting for us in the trees.
That is haunting.
Thank you for joining us for this inaugural discussion. We invite you to drop your theories in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and leave a like. Keep questioning.